What's going on, everybody? I'm Johnny Brook. Welcome back to another Crafted Workshop video, and welcome back to the Not So Tiny House. So in this week's video, I'm going to show you guys how I installed all of these touch to open cabinets that I've been working on for the last couple of weeks.
There you go.
Also, before we get started with the video, I want to say a big shout out to Craftsman who sponsored this week's video, and stay tuned till later in the video to learn more about the V20 cordless power tools I used throughout this install. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the project. So after getting the cabinets painted and reassembled, we could get the cabinets loaded up and moved over from my shop to the tiny house. And thankfully I had a helping set of hands in my buddy Nate, and I'd like to officially welcome Nate to the Crafted team, and you'll be seeing him in more videos coming up on the channel. So once we had the first half of cabinets loaded in, we could also get a few of the awesome Samsung appliances moved into the house, the first of which was this compact fridge. And I wanted to go ahead and get this thing unboxed so I could ensure the cabinets were going to fit around the fridge, as I knew it was going to be a fairly tight fit. With the fridge unboxed, we could get to work installing the first upper cabinet, and I started with this leftmost cabinet as I knew this run would end at the other wall with a filler strip. So first things first, I checked the ceiling in this area for level, since the cabinets would be butting right into the ceiling, and it was pretty close to dead on, so that simplified things a bit. Next, I marked out the locations of the studs on the wall and also measured out the dimensions to the studs from the left corner. I then transferred those measurements to the back of the first cabinet, making marks about 2 inches from the top and bottom edges of the cabinet at each stud location. I could then drill through the back of these marks, drilling through to the inside of the cabinet. Next, I flipped the cabinet over and countersunk the holes from the inside with this countersink bit, which is specifically designed for the screws I'm using to install these cabinets. And these 2.5-inch screws have a really large head, which creates a ton of holding power, and they can easily be covered up with some peel and stick caps, which I'll show a little later, and this makes for a super clean looking install. With the screws pre-driven into the holes, we could get the cabinet mounted, and this was pretty simple considering I had a second set of hands. That said, if you're working by yourself, there are quite a few options available for supporting cabinets during installation, including these Rockler work supports, which I've used in past videos. When mounting this first cabinet, I spent a lot of time getting it level and plumb, as this first cabinet will really dictate the rest of the cabinets attached to it. And I added shims where needed to get everything level and plumb, but before driving in the rest of the screws, I figured I'd just check and make sure the fridge was going to fit. Unfortunately, it was a super tight fit, tighter than I really wanted, and it turned out this was because the cabinet was actually sitting a little lower than expected due to the buildup created by the tape and mud layers where these pieces of drywall met up in these corners. Thankfully, there was a pretty simple fix for this, planing down the back corner of the cabinet to essentially scribe it to fit. And if you run into a similar issue and don't have an electric planer, you could also use a belt sander for this. After planing, we checked the fit again, and it was still sitting a little low, but this time it was catching on the back of the cabinet. So to help alleviate both of these fit issues, I decided to just space the upper cabinets off of the wall slightly by tacking a few paint stirrer sticks in line with where the cabinets would be screwed to the wall. And I used my Craftsman V20 narrow crown stapler for this, and this gave us an extra 1/8 inch of clearance in that upper corner to work with. We checked the fit one more time and it was looking good, so we could finally get the cabinet attached to the wall permanently, once again shimming where we needed to get the cabinet level and plumb. We also checked the fit of the fridge again, and it fit much better this time around. Once all the screws were set, I snapped off the excess shims, which is one of the great things about these composite shims, and then it was on to the next upper cabinet. Or at least, that's what I thought. So unfortunately, as it turned out, I had somehow mixed up the order of these cabinets in my head. So instead of installing the cabinet that was supposed to go above the fridge here, we had actually installed the cabinet that goes above the microwave. And that meant we got to uninstall the cabinet we had just gotten installed and repeat the whole process on this 36-inch wide cabinet. Once that was installed, we could get the 30-inch cabinet installed above where the microwave will be installed. First though, I needed to drill and cut a series of holes in the underside of the cabinet, and thankfully this Samsung microwave came with a paper template, so this was pretty simple. I got the holes drilled and also drilled a few starter holes for my jigsaw, which I needed to use to cut a large opening for the microwave to vent outside. Before removing the template, I also marked exactly where I needed to cut by scoring the cabinet with a utility knife, and then I could get the template removed and get to cutting. And the jigsaw made quick work of this large opening, and then I could get the hole drilled and slot cut for the cord for the microwave to route into the upper cabinet. And I drilled the hole with a hole saw, but only drilled about halfway through the cabinet so I didn't blow out the other side. I then cut the slot with the jigsaw to wrap up the bottom of the cabinet. I wasn't quite done yet though, as I needed to cut a hole for the 6-inch duct to run through the top of the cabinet. I used the jigsaw for this as well. Finally, I could cut a hole for the outlet box in the back of the cabinet. Once all that cutting was done, we test fit the cabinet and everything looked good, so I roughly marked where I needed to cut down the duct since I had left it long when installing it earlier. To make this cut, I pulled out my Craftsman V20 angle grinder, which made quick work of this task. With that done, we could get the cabinet installed on the wall, and I only added one screw to start here just to hold the cabinet in place while I got the front edge lined up with the first cabinet. And because I knew the first cabinet was plumb, lining up the edges of the two cabinets would ensure this second cabinet was also plumb. Once everything was flush, I clamped the cabinets together, and then I could add screws to hold the front edges together permanently. And I pre-drilled and countersunk the holes and then drove in 1¼ screws since my cabinets have 3/4 inch thick sides. Next, I got the other end of the cabinet plumbed up, again shimming it where needed, and then drove in the rest of the screws to secure the cabinet to the wall permanently. We could then repeat the process again for the last cabinet in line, and while we do that, I want to take a second to thank Craftsman again for sponsoring this video. And as you've probably seen, I've been using these Craftsman V20 power tools for a few years now, and overall they've been great. And Craftsman offers a full line of cordless power tools in their V20 line, which also includes cordless lawn and garden tools. So if you're looking to upgrade your cordless power tools, make sure to check out the links to all of these Craftsman V20 tools I used in this video, all of which are available on Amazon in the video description below. The last cabinet to install was this little 12-inch wide unit, which creates the opening for both the microwave and the fridge. And we repeated the same process of clamping the front edges, only this time I added the screws from above. Also, I realized this is a bit of a funky cabinet layout compared to your typical upper cabinets, and that was because I built these specifically for this kitchen layout and for this hardware. And your cabinets might look a little different, but the basics of installing them will be roughly the same. With that, the upper cabinets were in, so we could go ahead and get the microwave installed. And one thing that made my particular microwave install a little tricky was that I have an in-wall toilet right behind this microwave, and the last thing I wanted to do was drill a hole in the tank and cause a huge leak. And I had seen that happen to Matt Reisinger, and that is the stuff of nightmares. So to avoid this, I marked out the location of the toilet tank, and then I could use the provided template to drill a few exploratory holes to ensure I wasn't going to hit anything. The leftmost hole ended up being a no-go, but thankfully the other two were clear for toggle bolts, so we could move on with the install. We got the Samsung microwave removed from the box so we could remove the mounting bracket from the back of the microwave, and then I got the toggle bolts installed on the bracket in the specified locations. Finally, I pushed them into the wall, then I could snug them up to get the bracket secured, also adding a screw to the single stud I had in this area. Since the toggle bolt wouldn't work on the left side, I installed a few of these wall dog anchors, which supposedly hold 50 pounds each by themselves. With that done, we could get the microwave lifted into place and set on the bracket, and then I could attach the microwave to the cabinet from above using the included screws. And I didn't have the transition piece to get the microwave attached to the ductwork yet, so we called it there for the microwave install, and I went ahead and got the doors reattached so I could take in the upper cabinets in all their glory, and I am pretty excited with how they turned out. Next, it was onto the base cabinets, and the first thing I needed to do was install a ledger board onto which the base cabinets will be installed. So I marked the height for the ledger board, accounting for the 3/8 inch flooring, which obviously hadn't been installed yet, and then set up a line laser at this height, which was 4 7/8 of an inch in my case. Once the laser line was set up, I checked to make sure there weren't any major high or low spots in the floor, and thankfully everything was within 1/8 of an inch, so I could get the ledger board installed. I marked the stud locations on the first wall and then got the ledger board, which was just a 2x6 ripped in half in my case, screwed to the studs with some 3-inch screws. I can then repeat the process for the ledger board on the other wall, aligning the top edge of the board with my laser line. So the first base cabinet to install was the corner cabinet, and I needed to make sure it was installed where it would set the sink cabinet in the correct location, centered under the window opening. So I went ahead and measured and marked a line where the corner cabinet should stop based on this location, and then I could get the corner cabinet prepped for installation. So first I went ahead and removed the sacrificial pieces I had added to the bottom of the cabinets so I could slide them around my shop floor without damaging them, and these were super helpful throughout the process of finishing and moving the cabinets as well. Next I got the leveling feet installed on the bottom of the cabinet, screwing on the bases, and then setting the height of the legs to that same 4 7/8 of an inch measurement just as a starting point. Once that was done, we could just flip the cabinet over and set it onto the ledger board. And before screwing the cabinet to the wall, I went ahead and set up a laser line at 23 3/4 of an inch from the wall, and I could use this line to make sure all of my cabinets were in the same plane along this wall. Once that was done, I could go ahead and adjust the leveling feet to get the front corner of the cabinet plumb, and I also marked the stud locations while I was at it. Next, I shimmed the back right edge of the cabinet until the front edge was lined up with my laser line, and then I could drive in a few screws to attach the cabinet to the wall. I repeated the process for the back left corner, getting the left front edge aligned with the laser, and then screwed it to the wall, and the corner cabinet was installed. Next up was the sink base, which is always a bit of a pain with all the holes you had to drill to get it fit. I started the fitting process by getting the locations of the drain pipe and hot and cold water supply lines marked on the bottom of the cabinet, and then I could get the holes partially drilled with a hole saw, once again stopping early so I didn't blow out the other side of the hole. Next, I cut the hole for the outlet box on the back of the cabinet, and then finally flipped the cabinet right side up to finish drilling the holes for the plumbing. I got the leveling feet installed off camera, and then we could drop the cabinet into place, and thankfully it fit great. I repeated the same process as the upper cabinets to get the front edges of these two cabinets attached, clamping them, pre-drilling and countersinking holes, and then driving in 1 1/4 screws, and then I got the cabinet leveled and shimmed before attaching it to the wall. I could then repeat the exact same process for the next two base cabinets, and of course my camera decided to go out of focus just as I started this time lapse, so apologies there. So once the wall oven cabinet was installed, I could finally get the sweet Samsung wall oven unboxed to make sure it fit in the cabinet, and unfortunately things didn't go quite as planned here. So as you can see, this unit suffered some major damage at some point during the shipping process, and I was still able to verify the fit with this mangled unit, but it was a real bummer to find this out when I was finally getting these units installed in the kitchen after they've been sitting in my crawl space for months. Anyway, I kept chugging along installing the base cabinets, and I got the trash and recycling cabinet installed next. And the dishwasher was going to be installed between this cabinet and the sink base, so I marked out the 18-inch space I needed and worked on getting the cabinet set in place. And I spent way too much time trying to accomplish this with a 4-foot level. And it finally dawned on me that I could just set up another line laser, because I have 2 of them, matching the height of the already installed cabinets, and save myself a ton of trouble, and that's what I did. So once I had the second laser set up, it was as easy as lining up both laser lines with the edges of the cabinet, making adjustments to the leveling feet as needed, and then I could shim the cabinet and get it screwed to the wall. The last cabinet outside of the island was this 3-drawer base next to the wall oven cabinet, and it was simple enough to install, although I did need to drill the holes for the electrical for the wall oven and cooktop here. And I once again attached the front edges of the cabinets using 1 1/4 screws, and then I could get the cabinet screwed to the studs and finally get the drawers reinstalled. And with that, all of the kitchen cabinets were in except for the island, which I'll be covering in a future video. So next I could get to work getting all the cabinets wired to the power supply for the touch to open drawers and doors. And believe it or not, I only needed 1 power supply for all of these cabinets, and I started by getting the power supply mounted in the trash and recycling cabinet, as there was an outlet located inside this cabinet. And once it was mounted, I ran the cable down through the bottom of the cabinet and then did a little cable management with these included clips. And I really just wanted to keep the wires from getting snagged on the drawers. I then reinstalled the drawers, and then I could connect the cable from the power supply to the cables coming from the servo drive units with one of these clamp connectors. And while I was in this area, I went ahead and got a hole drilled in the sink base for the dishwasher plumbing and power, and then got the Samsung Small Spaces dishwasher moved into place. Next, I attached another length of low voltage wire to the line I had just run, as I needed to run this wire all the way around these base cabinets and up the wall to the upper cabinets. And thankfully running this wire behind the fridge worked perfectly, as I was initially thinking I'd have to run this cable behind the drywall, which would have been a total pain. From there, I could spend some time getting all of the Aventos hinges wired up in the upper cabinets, doing my best to keep the cables nice and tidy, and I also programmed the collision settings on this rightmost cabinet, as I didn't want the upper door opening into the lower door while it was already open. Once all that was done, I could try out these touch-to-open cabinets for the first time in the tiny house, and needless to say, it was pretty exciting. From there, I was really in the home stretch, and the next thing to get installed was this finished in panel on this rightmost cabinet. And as you can see, this panel not only gives the cabinet a much nicer look, but it'll also allow me to cover up the rough edges of the flooring that I'll be installing later without adding additional trim. And I can do this by removing the panel temporarily during the flooring installation. Once the in panel was on, I could get the toe kicks set in place, and I just set them in place for now without adding the clips which attach to these leveling feet. The last thing to do was add these peel and stick caps over the screws in the upper cabinets, and I painted these caps with the same paint so that they match perfectly. They really help to hide the screw heads, and they all but disappear once the caps are on. And with that done, I could call this cabinet installation a wrap. All right, I think that's where I'm gonna wrap it up for this video. Overall, I am just super excited with the way all of these cabinets came together in here. I mean, I don't think I'll ever get tired of just kind of tapping these to open them. It is super, super cool. So next in the kitchen here, I guess will be the countertop installation, but I'm actually gonna go ahead and pivot to working on the new shop next because I have to be out of my current shop in about 4 weeks. So I know some of you guys have been asking about the new shop, so stay tuned for all of the videos on kind of renovating that almost 50-year-old woodworking shop that I'm gonna be moving into. So if you guys don't wanna miss that video and all of the rest of my videos, go ahead and get subscribed and ring the little notification bell below to get notified of when I post new videos. Also, as always, I'll have links to all of the tools and materials I use down in the video description below, including all of those Craftsman V20 tools, which were really handy for this install. And last, I wanna say a big shout out to all of my supporters on Patreon and my YouTube members. You guys are awesome. Your support means a lot to me. And if you guys wanna learn more about those programs, you can check them out in the video description below. All right, thanks for watching, y'all, and until next week, happy building.